Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
There's video that came out of a California prison cell the other day that shows a convicted killer celebrating because the L.A. County District Attorney George Gascon issued a new directive calling for the possible resentencing of inmates following 15 years of imprisonment. He's a convicted killer. He has right to be celebrating. He's got a prosecutor who has lost all contact and understanding of the law. A rogue prosecutor. Joining us now, Charles Cully Stimson, previously a trial attorney himself and a prosecutor, an expert in national security and crime control. Cully, glad to have you with us again.
Nice to be with you again. Thanks.
Well, I was looking at a piece you did for the Heritage Foundation dealing specifically with rogue prosecutors. I know you've been looking at different cities, and we'll come to the St. Louis issue in a moment, but specifically the L.A., that he stands out, stands out, as you call, a rogue among the rogues. Go ahead.
He is. These Soros-backed puppets, essentially bought and paid for politicians, are essentially pro-criminal, anti-victim former criminal defense attorneys who they buy into office, and then they enact these pro-criminal, anti-victim policies. And George Gascon, who was the failed DA in San Francisco, crime skyrocketed when he was the DA there. Rapes tripled, by the way, under the 5 years he was there, year over year. He issued 9 sweeping so-called special directives a minute after he got sworn into office, and it eviscerates law and order and the ability to enact criminal justice reforms. I'm all for reforms, so are most regular thinking folks, but this is not reform. This is pro-criminal, anti-victim. So
you've been on both sides. You've been on both sides. You've been there as a prosecutor and a trial lawyer, so you can clearly see
I've been a criminal defense lawyer, and I loved it, and was a prosecutor and loved that, and was a judge for 5 years. And so I've been on all sides of the courtroom. And look, we need a vibrant clash, an adversarial system, which is what we have designed, where you have competent, ethical, zealous prosecutors representing the people, and you have competent, zealous, aggressive criminal defense attorneys representing the accused, because as conservatives, we certainly believe in our liberty interests. We don't want anyone depriving us of our constitutional rights, and you need a fair and equitable judge to call balls and strikes. What Soros and the elites who are funding these rogue prosecutor races are doing is eliminating the adversary in the adversarial system. They're replacing prosecutors, independent, whether they're Democrat or Republican is irrelevant, independent law and order folks with pro-criminal, anti-victim people. And so they are buying these races because they know that the prosecutor is the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system, and it's a pretty cheap investment for them.
And I have to say, it is appealing to the progressives and the lefts, and often, I have to say, some of those who fear that they might end up in front of the prosecutor. And you talk about some of the special directives he issued. The pretrial release, which you say is basically let everyone out of jail and then cash bail.
Right. I mean, they're very clear, Larry, what their goals are. They write about it. They crow about it. Yeah. They brag about it. So they're not hiding the ball here. They hide the ball when they're running for office, and then once they get elected, they whip out these radical pro-criminal directives. So he's eliminated cash bail for murderers, child molesters, everybody. So even if you've beheaded 10 people, you're just going to get out on no bail. And they're going to put maybe an ankle monitor on you or tell you to be a good boy. But so one of the directives says that if you got a life sentence or any sentence over a period of time, once you've served 15 years, you're out. I order my 1,000 prosecutors, it's the biggest prosecutor's office in the country, to join with the criminal defense attorney in a motion to release this dude after 15 years. So these folks in Folsom State Prison, these convicted murderers, are having a party, and it was caught on video because they used a burner video cell phone, celebrating, cheering each other with this moonshine they made in their jail because, George Gascon directive is going to let me out. Well, this guy should be rotting in hell.
Yeah, that was exactly the story I was referring to a moment ago. And that convicted killer facing 40 years for shooting another gang member in the head. It's still a death. And as you pointed out, the prosecutors are being directed to join with the defense attorneys to say, okay, we modify and we're willing to let him go at 15 instead of life or 40, whatever it would be.
Right. Here's the deal. They pretend that the entire country is systemically racist and that the criminal justice system is systemically racist. It's not. Of course, there are black, brown, and white racists. We all know that there are. But the system is not racist. And the policies that they put in place have resulted in crime spiking in all the cities where these rogue prosecutors have been elected. Because why? They refuse to prosecute entire classes of crime.
I'm totally surprised. I'm totally surprised that that's happening. Really, really. Cully Stimson, come on, really. Cully Stimson, Heritage Foundation. You're saying that because they're doing all this, suddenly crime is going up? Oh my God! Oh my God!
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're sitting. Otherwise, fall down. So. And that's their Achilles heel.
Yeah.
I mean, they know that their policies are pro-criminal, anti-victim, and they are counting on the liberal media not reporting on crime skyrocketing in their cities. But here's the thing. The very people they pretend to care the most about, black and brown people and other underserved and underprivileged people in inner cities, are the very people the policies hurt the most because those are the people who are most victimized.
Absolutely.
So they're the racist. If we're talking about racist, their policies have a racial disparate impact because they're hurting and killing other black and brown people.
And to that extent, I think those communities deserve as much protection from law enforcement and the law enforced in their communities just as the wealthy estates of Hilton or someplace in Bel Air. And you point out also this is going on all across the nation. Now, in the city of St. Louis, they have also a George Soros-backed candidate who got in, Kim Gardner. First thing she did was immediately start dismissing a lot of the statements by police officers and not accepting them anymore. And it's happening all over the nation.
Well, fortunately, it's not happening all over the nation yet, Larry. There's 2,300 elected DA offices in the country. But what George Soros and his ilk and his PACs and his cutouts have done is selected big cities, Boston for Rachel Rollins, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Kim Gardner there in St. Louis.
Blue cities.
Kim Fox in Chicago, Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, George Gascon in L.A. The list goes on and on. There's a few dozen. And they're race mongers, and they're pro-criminal, anti-victim zealots. And they're enacting these crazy radical rogue policies that are harming people. And so, for example, in L.A., there's a recall petition against George Gascon led by none other than the black and brown victims who've had enough. Not Republicans, not conservatives.
Good.
These are Democrats. And look, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is not a conservative or liberal thing. This is a law and order versus chaos thing.
Now, to that extent also, we have to be concerned that these prosecutors, many times they have additional political aspirations. And now with the Biden administration, one of them might be tapped to become a federal judge. Well,
I worry not only about that, but we wrote a piece about is a rogue U.S. attorneys coming to your jurisdiction? Because remember, there were 94 Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys in the 94 districts around the country. And if the Senate if Biden nominates and the Senate confirms these rogue-type prosecutors as U.S. attorneys, then you don't have the backstop to have the feds come in if there is a federal crime committed to prosecute the people that the local rogue DAs aren't going to do it. So in Philadelphia, you had Bill McSwain, who was the U.S. attorney. He cleaned up the mess that Larry Krasner, the rogue DA, wouldn't. You had Andrew Lelling in Boston, who was the U.S. attorney, a law and order guy also, who cleaned up the mess that Rachel Rollins has left. And you had other regular, traditional law and order, independent prosecutors who were federal U.S. attorneys cleaning up the mess that these rogue prosecutors were leaving the city in ruins for. So, look, this is not going to go away until we shed a light on what they're doing and bring the heat to it. And it's going to require victims' rights groups to stand out and step up and say enough is enough.
I want to turn the subject just briefly because since I've got you on, Cully is also an expert on Guantanamo Bay and dealing with the detention policy and operations. Now, the Biden administration that's one executive order he hasn't signed yet, but what do you see coming and what's the value of keeping Guantanamo Bay or not?
Well, we're, number one, still in a state of armed conflict. We're in a state of armed conflict, even though most people probably don't even think about it anymore, against al-Qaeda, the Afghan Taliban, ISIS, and associated forces. And under the laws of war, we're entitled to detain the enemy for the duration of the hostilities. Guantanamo now has 39 al-Qaeda members in military detention. Some are facing military commissions for like the 5 guys involved in the 9/11 attack, or Nashri, who's the USS Cole bomber. But believe it or not, Larry, we had over 103,000 detainees since 9/11. Over 75,000 in Iraq, over 25,000 in Afghanistan, and at its peak, 669 at Guantanamo. Now we're down to 39 and none in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, in the last 30 seconds, do we keep Guantanamo Bay or what do we do?
Well,
can you solve it in 30 seconds?
Until the war's over.
Sir?
You keep until the war's over.
Okay, that's easy enough. Listen, I appreciate your time, Cully. Always glad to have you on board. And thanks again for helping us pay attention to these rogue prosecutors and the George Soros money and what he's buying. I really appreciate it.
We're writing about Kim Gardner next week, so stand by.
All right. There's part of your audience right there. Cully Stimson, again, from the Heritage Foundation. I appreciate it. We'll get back to him on that Kim Gardner piece in addition to everything else. Coming up, Cuomo facing a new concern that there might have been an allegation that now might actually be a crime. Stand by.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.